Another category of threats to internal validity is associated with the instruments that are used to measure and manipulate the constructs in our hypothesis. The threats of low construct validity, instrumentation, and testing fall into this category. I'll start with low construct validity. Construct validity is low if our instruments contain a systematic bias or measure another construct or property entirely. In this case, there's not much point in further considering the internal validity of a study. As I discussed in an earlier video, construct validity is a prerequisite for internal validity. If our measurement instruments or manipulation methods are of poor quality, then we can't infer anything about the relation between the hypothesized constructs. Suppose I hypothesize that loneliness causes depression. I attempt to lower loneliness of elderly people in a retirement home by giving them a cat to take care of, expecting their depression to go down. Suppose that taking care of the cat didn't affect loneliness at all, but instead gave residents a higher social status. They're special because they're allowed to have a cat. The manipulation aimed at lowering loneliness, in fact, changed a different property, social status. Now consider my measurement of depression. What if the questionnaire that I used actually measured feeling socially accepted instead of feeling depressed? If we accidentally manipulated social status or measured feeling accepted, then we cannot conclude anything about the relation between loneliness and depression. The second threat that relates to measurement methods is instrumentation. The threat of instrumentation occurs when an instrument is changed during the course of the study. Suppose I use a self-report questionnaire to measure depression at the start of the study, but I switch to a different questionnaire, or maybe to an open interview, at the end of the study. Well then, any difference in depression scores might be explained by the use of different instruments. For example, the scores on the post-test at the end of the study could be lower because the new instrument measures slightly different aspects of depression, for example. Of course, it seems rather stupid to change your methods or instruments halfway, but sometimes a researcher has to depend on others for data. For example, when using tests that are constructed by national testing agencies or polling agencies. A good example is the use of the standardized diagnostic tool called the DSM. This diagnostic and statistical manual is used to classify things like mental illness, depression, autism, and it's updated every 10 to 15 years. Now you can imagine the problems this can cause, for example, for a researcher who is doing a long-term study on schizophrenia. In the recently updated DSM, several subtypes of schizophrenia are no longer recognized. Now if we see a decline in schizophrenia in the coming years, is this a real effect? Or is it due to the change in measurement system? The last threat I want to discuss here is testing, also referred to as sensitization. Administering a test or measurement procedure can affect people's behavior. A testing threat occurs if this sensitizing effect of measuring provides an alternative explanation for our results. For example, taking the depression pretest at the start of the study might alert people to their feelings of depression. This might cause them to be more proactive about improving their emotional state, for example, by being more social. Of course, this threat can be eliminated by introducing a control group. Both groups will be similarly affected by the testing effect. Their depression scores will both go down, but hopefully more so in the cat companionship group. Adding a control group is not always enough, though. In some cases, there's a risk that the pretest sensitizes people in the control group differently than people in the experimental group. For example, in our cat study, the pretest, in combination with getting a cat, could alert people in the experimental cat group to the purpose of the study. They might report lower depression on the post-test, not because they're less depressed, but to ensure the study seems successful, so they can keep the cat. Suppose people in the control group don't figure out the purpose of the study, because they don't get a cat. They're not sensitized and not motivated to change their scores on the post-test. This difference in sensitization provides an alternative explanation. One solution is to add an experimental and control group that weren't given a pretest, I'll discuss this solution in more detail when we consider different experimental designs. Okay, so to summarize, internal validity can be threatened by low construct validity, instrumentation, and testing. Low construct validity and instrumentation can be eliminated by using valid instruments and valid manipulation methods, and of course by using them consistently. Testing can be eliminated by using a special design that includes groups that are exposed to a pretest and groups that aren't.